morning and welcome to Beyond the Headlines on Freedom Square TV. We are reaching you from our studios in Enugu. As a young man growing up, I knew what happened in society by either watching the television or listening to the radio or going to where we call newspaper stands to read the newspaper because I couldn't afford one. If I want to know what time of the day it was, I listened to the radio and I had accurate time. That was the traditional means of actually, so to speak, getting news, information, and government activities. Until very recently, when the development of technology became rampant in society, citizens began to acquire handheld gadgets, especially the smart telephones. Then citizens began to do the job of journalists. I recall once when a very important person died in a community in a local government area. There were steps that are usually taken before the announcement is made. But a citizen who had that wrote about it, posted in the net, and very close relations of the dead who should have been properly informed read it on the social media. They were scandalized. There was also an issue where a traditional ruler was brutally murdered, something that ordinarily should be done in a traditional manner. A curious person, who now called a citizen journalist, began to broadcast that. Today, events happen. And before you said Jack, it is known everywhere. It has its good sides, it has its bad sides. And that's why we've invited the man who is grounded in communication, a teacher of teachers, a communicator by excellence, Chukwudi Anyianuka, Ph.D., who actually is the Publicity Secretary of the Association of Communication Scholars and Professionals of Nigeria, and is also an outstanding member of the Guild of Public Affairs Analysts, the Enugu State chapter. I want to have invited him to the studio this morning to dissect the concept of citizen journalism. Chukwudi, good morning and welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Good morning, Chief Dr. Anioke, with a lot of titles. I'm happy to be here this morning.
Yes, you're happy to be here. Well.
And I hope I'll be able to fit the garb because it appears as if I'm wearing foreign robes based on your introduction.
We're speaking to power. Okay, citizen journalism. What is it? How did it get started?
Okay, fantastic. Your preamble, you've already captured the second part of the question by explaining that it was something that happened on account of the evolution of technology over time. Of course, newspaper was the first medium to see the light of day. Then it was followed by the radio medium. And then, of course, we finally had the TV, which was a combination of audio and visual. And then over time, something that started off as an experiment of the United States for its military, the internet came to being and became something that was not accessible to people, organizations, individuals, and then of course the development and evolution of the smartphone from, you recall, the initial telephone we were quite familiar was the one you needed to put your hand against exactly, and then you turn it. Different kinds of dialing. You could press the button, but it started with spinning the dial. Then just pick the numbers, dial it, and then today, what we're carrying today is not just the phone. What we're carrying today contains both our radio, our television, our newspaper, everything you can think about. It's a mini computer in itself. That is what the smartphone is, because it has so developed that the features have become so sophisticated that the level of the type of images you can capture, the quality of the pictures, the quality of the audio, and then of course, AI has also come into play to make designing or preparing stories a bit more comfortable, but of course we know that it also has a negative aspect. So that is about what I can explain, how we have several apps with which you can develop all manner of things on the internet today. So that's about how we can describe how citizen journalism has come to stay. Citizen journalism didn't start today, but it became accentuated particularly during the COVID-19. People were compelled to stay indoors, and then even traditional news outlets assessing news around town became very difficult. So people began to record what they were going through and began to spread it, began to share it on the internet. So it now caught fire. There are certain things I'll reserve for much later, but that was how citizen journalism started. But what is citizen journalism? Citizen journalism can simply be conceptualized as the art and science of gathering, processing, and disseminating information through the internet. That internet is very critical because we're using it to distinguish other forms of journalism. You talked about traditional journalism. While traditional journalism deploys traditional modes of traditional media, I have mentioned them. You also mentioned them: radio, television, and newspaper. Citizen journalism dwells primarily on disseminating information through online platforms. And we know online platforms that support the job of citizen journalists.
Okay, citizen journalism has come to stay. How many perceive it as a threat to the mainstream media, while others think it complements it? What are your thoughts?
Okay, well, if you look at researches that have been carried out, particularly in Western climes and even locally, because I'm a researcher and I'm quite familiar with this, you see that citizens' consumption of traditional modes of communication have declined tremendously. And this has also affected the output and the resources generation of these media outfits. For instance, how many people, what's the print run of newspapers today? I had journalism experience because I cut my teeth in journalism at the Guardian newspaper. And sometimes I'll stay up to see when we go to bed. Go to bed is when you begin to print the newspapers of the day. And usually this takes place at night. In fact, then Guardian had 2 editions. We had the first edition and the second edition. The reason why it was so that they could meet the high demand.
What will not call breaking stories?
Well, we'll come to that. Sometimes even the second edition will only dwell on what was also printed in the first edition because the print run isn't sufficient. So they have to go for a second edition. And these things were circulated using trucks. Yeah. Sometimes some of them, because those trucks run through the night when Nigeria was a bit safer in terms of its roads, so that they can deliver at a lorry, they can deliver at Enugu, they can deliver at Port Harcourt. Then, you have people who will come to Enugu, who will probably supply to Nsukka, who will probably supply to all that very key places where newspapers are bought. But things have changed. You don't see those print runs anymore. So newspapers are just printed to serve certain demands, particularly those who are on subscription, and then they just supply some for vendors, like you talked about the Newspaper Readers Association, where you have newspaper stands.
Free Readers
Association, rather. You still have them. For instance, Enugu, a very popular place where you find them now is at Edinburgh.
Yes.
When you get to Edinburgh, you see that there are still free readers who come to converge in the mornings, not because they do not have their phone, but you know that the physical touch of newspaper gives you some kind of satisfaction beyond what you do with your phone. There are people who still love reading hard copy than reading soft copy. So to go back to the question, so yes, it has affected the newspapering. It has also affected even radio listening. Apart from some people like also are addicted to the radio. A lot of young people, because I carry out this experiment consistently. I do some kind of research. I ask my students, when was the last time you listened to the radio? Though I am teaching communication, you find out that a lot of them don't love listening to the radio. But yet they have their phones. There's been a whole lot of a distraction, because with your phone, you can download a radio app that will enable you to listen to the radio without actually connecting to the internet. But you see that they won't do that. Okay, so I'm trying to emphasize how citizen journalism has affected the other forms.
Yes.
Now, it has also complemented. It's important for us to also note this, because you cannot find any radio station that is operating that wants to survive under this environment today that hasn't gone online. Same thing with television stations. They have also gone online. So they have TV streaming services because they want to serve, a wider population. They want to also be relevant. They want to also be visible. So you see traditional media organizations struggling for visibility. So you see newspaper organizations, you must be online. Because if you're not online, you won't be able to reach your target audience. So they have the online versions of this newspaper. And now there are other ways that I believe that in future can be exploited by newspaper organizations or traditional media organizations to complement, or rather to ensure that there is a good complement between citizen journalists and traditional reporting.
Okay, yes. Just like most things in life, you have the good side, you have the bad side. Actually, in very trying times, help the mainstream media to even get information which ordinarily they would not have gotten. Okay.
Can I give you a classic example? There's a particular television station, a very popular one, that used to have a program they called iReports.
iReports.
I don't know whether you are familiar with it.
I know that does the trending stories.
Good. So, exactly. There's a current one that also does trending stories. Most of the stories that it reports and then they analyze are based on things that they captured on social media.
Yes.
What people have shared on what citizen journalists have shared on social media. So they use it to have very robust discussions that actually begin to crystallize or catalyze discussions in society, and even make governments uncomfortable, make people who are actually involved in things that are inimical to society's growth uncomfortable. So you see this discussion, and then we've also seen where these things have had very positive effects, where certain policies that government had intended to institute were actually shut down on account of citizen journalism. So we must actually see how it has helped traditional journalism. Yes.
Okay. We'll sound a little bit academic here. Agenda setting.
Yeah.
Is an important aspect of journalism. In what ways would you say that citizen journalism has been able to set agenda for the mainstream media?
Malcolm's and Shaw. Well, just give a classic example. Well, maybe I could mention the television station. Arise Television is a classic example. That's what you referenced. So now the discussion, because if you're familiar with the agenda setting theory simply says that while media organizations do not tell people what to think, but it compels people to think about certain issues and discuss certain issues in society. So there are certain things that, remember in fact, I need to cast our minds back to when we had government ownership and control over broadcast organizations, even the print organizations at the time.
Yes.
I listened to your interview when you were interviewing our very good friend, Bob Adekwe.
Okay,
Bob Adekwe. Yes, I listened to the Eagle. He's a veteran in the industry, and he was describing how traditional journalism used to set agenda very properly. But now, you cannot ignore the feeling citizen journalism, or rather the internet, has actually democratized information today. So the information that used to be the exclusive preserve of certain people is now within the hands of ordinary citizens. So they have an opportunity and a platform to be able to express themselves and say, though I believe that there are certain levels of control that should be instituted to reduce the nature of some of the content that is thrown in our faces, that assault our sensibilities and senses as a people, and that also the proliferation of fake news. We see where fake news is actually driven, and the people now believe it. I could give some classic instances, and then so these are things that needs to be controlled.
Okay, let's take let's cast our minds back to some.
So, sorry, there's a question. You said, how does it help set agenda?
Yes.
I hope this answers the question. That this is how it sets the agenda.
Yeah, of course.
Even for mainstream media. Some people have actually argued today. Sorry, I might not be, because this is something that interests me so much. Some people have argued that the mainstream media is no longer the traditional media. In other words, they are saying that online media, it should be described as the mainstream media today, because we have a polychronic generation, a generation that they are either wielding their smartphones, or they are wielding tabs, or they have their laptops, which is always online. Okay? So now that makes them polychronic, because they have several devices they can have. A lot of people carry more than, I know you don't have only one phone. I know you have more than one.
He's speaking for you.
But I know, because I've observed you, and I know you carry more than one phone. So that even if anything happens to one, you can always switch. Like I do have 2 phones, but I carry one at a time. Okay? So that's one challenge, one thing we must always have at the back of our mind. Why this is thriving, and why online journalism should be looked at now as the mainstream media. I'm not saying citizen journalism, I'm saying online journalism.
Yeah, you just got into my turf. My PhD dissertation was actually on the influence of second screen.
Yes,
which is of course the phone. And then part of the conversation was on agenda setting. To what extent, but eventually we agree that both set agenda.
What comes and show.
Yeah, but you discover that these days, most TV, radio anchors pick their headlines or their content from the online media. There's a breaking story that somebody had just posted, and then you see an anchor say, "Oh, did you hear this?" But one of the things you just talked about, this polychronic and the monochronic viewers. One thing is that if we are using the online, you could multitask, because I could be listening to news, and I'm talking to you, discussing what is going on TV. They're texting you.
That is true.
Or WhatsApping you.
That's true.
And that is why it's a lot easier for people to watch football simultaneously and discuss it. If you're using traditional media, you watch the television, you can't discuss it. But because you're either watching it on television or on the screen, but you're using your phone to do what? To engage in conversation with somebody who is comparing notes. Anyway, I was coming to research Nigerian history, and I want to look at the role of citizen journalism in some moments, in some occasions, in some activities, and even in some threats to society. How would you say that this citizen journalism had actually stood out in the recent past in the current Nigerian history?
Very brilliant question, I must say. But let me reference one thing let me address one of the issues you raised before this question. And that is in terms of where people who attack journalists depend solely on what they see on social media to set the agenda. Or when it comes in, they'll broadcast it as breaking news. You see how this thing has also led to a lot of disinformation and misinformation of the public.
Yes.
And I think it behoves anyone who wears the tag of journalist to make sure that you verify whatever information, whether it comes in immediately. We've seen situations, for instance, in the case of Muhammadu Buhari's son, who was appointed as the chairman of the agricultural Babangida, rather.
Yeah,
I wanted to, yes, sorry about that.
Babangida's son.
And then it was reported that he rejected it, and we saw, that there were mainstream media organizations that reported that this was true. Eventually, it turned out that it was false. Now, let's go to significant moments where citizen journalism has actually stood out. in Nigeria, there are several that can be cited. I already talked about COVID-19.
Yes.
Nigeria, actually, we saw a lot of citizens, complaining. Remember the quarantine, where people were being quarantined. We didn't even understand at the time. We had very little understanding of what COVID was. And then we also saw people deploy the citizen journalism to begin to do a lot of criticism against the vaccines that people were taking. We had all manner of things at the time. And then you look at the 2023 election, which I also referenced. Before that time, well, in fact, we had NSAS. I think if you look at citizen journalism, NSAS probably stands out as the most significant moment in Nigeria's history where citizen journalism was deployed the most. We saw, in fact, exposed where people who were provided palliatives that they should share to people who needed it, who were using it for their own private. Some were storing it. We saw all manner of things. We saw a lot of misbehavior of even security agencies during that period. So that's one classic time. And then secondly, in 2023, I think the 2023 election, the presidential and the other elections that followed after that. The presidential elections, we saw people in their polling units, when their results were being counted. There was even a young man who became very popular at the time. You remember, LOP. There was this young man who used to pronounce LOP. There was this young man who, I understand is a motor parts dealer somewhere at Ladipo. But he became, a sensation during that period on account of the excitement he was showing and the way he was using his own Igbo local dialect to, reel out the numbers that were being pronounced. So there's several other instances of where journalists were actually harassed by security agencies. Sometimes these things are taken secretly. You also saw where police people were collecting bribe. The security agencies were pulling. There's somebody in the bus will secretly capture things of that nature. So citizen journalism has been very, very significant and has played very critical roles during this period and in exposing things that ordinarily we would never have known.
Okay. Do you think, on the flip side, that it has in more ways than one help strengthen or encouraging security? Sometimes you see trending videos, viral videos of something you could not really want to watch, where bandits were, not state actors, would have done something terrible, and they will just take a shot of it and post it, and it's flying everywhere. And they also said a lot of people had actually been encouraged through citizen journalism to join such organizations.
Yeah, another very brilliant question. In fact, what came to my mind when you raised that question is the Simon Ekpa issue and the sit at home. How the sit at home became, I wouldn't use the word popular, how it became quite notorious in the Southeast, where young men were recruited into militancy and where a lot of people lost their lives. That is actually one of the negative aspects of citizen journalism. Because there is no control. And that is why I said that there must be some kind of regulation. Because the citizens who don't know that they should self-regulate, they really don't know. They really can't understand the nature of the content they should post. Content that not just assault the sensibilities of people, content that are not supposed to be watched even by people of a certain age, content that actually drives somebody's BP up and even lead to someone's death. For instance, you referred to someone who just suddenly, without the announcement, usually when somebody passes on, somebody who is not passes on, you first of all have to call immediate family. You have to send somebody there actually to stay with them and try to control them so that they won't, hurt themselves or even sometimes even die on account of the shock.
Yeah.
So this thing is broken to them in a very calm, systematic way. I've had cause, when I lost one of my cousins to go see my auntie, stay with her and bring the news to her and make sure that I was there to make sure she didn't harm herself. But some things of this nature can no longer take place on account of our, access to the internet. So people should be sensitive. People should be sensible. People should understand that there are rules that should govern our behavior, even online. And that is where education, social media literacy comes to play. This is where we must begin to teach people, generally, engage in programs that will be also shared online. We've also seen, a trickling of such things, but then we need to actually increase things of that, things that constitute what we call etiquettes for using online. Using your smartphone, sending messages online, how you should behave rather. We also see where the citizen journalists have driven a lot of hatred within society. We've seen this ethnic divides. For instance, you saw the renaming of certain streets in Lagos that were bearing names that were indigenous to a particular ethnic group, and then it has been changed. And this thing keeps driving hate. So these are the negative aspects. These are things that we must begin to watch as people who are quite enlightened, and we must take strategic actions to address them. It is not just about talking about them. But I think there should be regulation. Regulation should be, but not to entirely stop citizen journalism, because it's something that has come to stay. I give you a classic example when the immediate past government regulated on it was Twitter at the time, but now X, where it was totally banned. You see that people bypassed it.
Yeah, they did.
They used what they call the VPN, and they bypassed it, and they were still communicating using the same platform to communicate. So you see, it cannot work, but there should be some kind of regulation. Now, there is some form of regulation, because there are certain platforms you cannot post certain things. Once they see it, your language must be in line with their policies, which, before you are allowed to even join those platforms, there's an agreement that is present. A lot of people don't even read this. So you just click because you're in a hurry to get involved.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you now post something that will make them ban you for a while. Then sometimes it can become a permanent ban. So regulation is very, very important if we must use citizen journalism to advance society.
Yes, regulation is important, and we're going to take a moment of break. And when we come back, there are a lot of things to talk about. We'll talk about strengths, we'll talk about opportunities, we'll talk about major challenges, and we'll talk about how can citizen journalism influence policy and governance outcomes. So we'll go on a short break. I'll be back shortly. Welcome back from that short break. We're still watching Beyond the Headlines, and on Freedom Square TV. My guest is still Chukwudi, Anyianuka, Ph.D. Doc, let's talk about strengths, and let's talk about opportunities. What opportunities does citizen journalism present in the democratic setting?
I think we've already started benefiting so much from the opportunities. Some of them we've mentioned. There are certain issues that we were not aware that has actually come to public light, which has affected policy making. I talked about the democratization of information. So previously, we used to have a government that had a stranglehold control over information. But now, information has been democratized, that even people in rural communities, though there are still some excluded groups, so there are still some people who still don't have access to the internet. That's the truth. But you also see people who do have access to the internet, who still reach out to those who don't have access to the internet. Then their views have also become part of what has formed the public discourse. So the challenges that people face in rural villages have come to limelight on account of citizen journalism. So that is something that is, because democracy in itself is about people's participation. Where people's participation in government is actually completely excluded, then you cannot describe it as a democracy. So that's one of the major advantages. So it has brought that people can now express their views concerning, certain things they feel. Okay. So people have been able to express their views, their own little ideas, contributed, to change policies. And there are several other ways, really.
Okay.
Government has become a bit more careful.
Yes.
You understand? In their claims. Because citizen journalists will bring out the facts and present before them and say, no, this is not what you claim to be true.
Okay, let's look at it. How does it affect grassroots reportage? Because before now, a lot of things that happen in our communities, our villages, remain largely unreported. So, what's the contribution of citizen journalism?
I think you've already answered the question. The way the question is phrased,
yes,
shows that what you're saying, because that's exactly the point I was making earlier. We know a lot about rural communities right now. For instance, the level of insecurity in some states and some communities. So previously, you see that governments will try to hide such information. They don't even want to report it because they don't want people to know about it. But now we know. We know. So when people get involved in things that are inimical to the growth of society, you see someone who just come up and say, no, these people that you're claiming doing this are not the ones who look at it. And the person will present us with evidence. But then it also behooves us to understand that there's also sometimes people also manipulate this. They use it for their own selfish purposes when they manipulate in the sense that what we call fake news. So they will spread something that is falsehood and present it as if it is something which also must be very careful. But whether the strengths and you didn't talk about the weakness, you talked about the strengths.
We're talking
about the strengths and opportunities. So these are opportunities still are bound, because by the time society becomes a bit more enlightened about the use of of the internet in citizen journalism practice. I want to call it a practice. That is my own formation on it. By the time they become more informed, more enlightened, more sensitized about the best ways to deploy this, I believe that it holds opportunities beyond one's imagination. Okay? Society will be better for it because government will now be compelled to do what it ought to do. Individuals who are also involved in, very shady activities, even up till today, you know that some of them are quite fearful about it. There are also traditional practices. There are practices that has not actually promoted the growth of where such things happen. For instance, you remember a woman that a particular community somewhere in Anambra State, that a fellow woman stripped naked when the husband died and accused her of things of that nature. So you see that things will begin to correct such ills in our society because of how citizen journalists have actually captured these things and used it to expose the things that happen, things that we ought not to be involved in.
In our earlier conversation, we talked about how, to a large extent, citizen journalism had influenced insecurity. But is there a flip coin with that?
Where it has also helped?
Yeah, is there a flip coin to that?
Absolutely. Crimes are captured live. I'm sorry to actually make this reference. There was this video that went viral, where CCTV captured military officers invading a particular agency of government. And you saw them using their jackboots to force open the doors, and then you saw them even harassing and beating someone or arresting the person. So things of that nature has helped even security agents to be careful in their actions. Okay? Now, it has also exposed where criminal activities are taking place in communities, in neighborhoods, where CCTV cameras too, because someone actually recorded this from a camera. There's a young man, a couple of days ago, was reported. He showed videos of how his home was attacked by armed, we don't even know who they are, whether they were bandits, or whatever it is that they were. But the CCTV captured how these people, and how he was able to, how he managed to escape. All right. Sadly, I don't even know, I need to actually verify this, that he died quite recently.
Oh, that would be a bit.
He decided he wasn't going to now go out with his vehicle and then went out on a...
Okay, yes, I saw that.
On his bike. and ended up dying on that bike. I mean, it was an accident. So those are things. So people now know. So we even wear hoods. We saw the robbery that took place very recently in Enugu, a popular phone shop somewhere. I don't know how to in Enugu here. How even the identity of these people, you understand? Because some of them didn't wear hoods. In fact, none of them wore hoods. Do you understand? So that's what citizen journalism can do in exposing crime. So people become a bit more careful. They begin to leave the state. I believe that if it hadn't been for citizen journalism, I believe that a state like Enugu would have witnessed even much more level of insecurity than it is presently witnessing. I'm also give credit, by the way, of course, to the efforts of government, the current government, in providing all those DRS buses that are manned with cameras, and also having a CCC, a command and control center that is also well manned, with such gadgets to monitor what is happening in Enugu. So I think it's a contributory factor. Yeah. But more than that, the citizen journalism has been, what you could actually describe as the major hindrance to the escalation of crime.
Okay. The other thing I want to talk about is about policy making. The social media had provided platforms where you can, men and women of influence, can speak to matters that could help government formulate certain policies. From your experience so far, do you think that citizen journalism has also helped in shaping policy formulation and governance outcomes?
Yes, I believe so. If you look at online journalism very critically, you see, I mentioned from the beginning that the traditional media organizations, as we've known them, that they have all migrated, not migrated actually. They're running a hybrid system.
Yeah, you can't run any video without
so they're running for instance, we're speaking online, right?
Yeah.
Are we helping in shaping policies? Someone might just capture aspects of this discussion and share.
Yeah.
Another person will run a more intensive commentary on this as a citizen journalist. He runs a more intensive commentary that will be more expository than what we are even discussing at the moment.
Pick just one aspect of what you said.
Fantastic.
And then
exactly.
Yes.
So it has contributed greatly. But what we should ask is government taking citizen journalists serious? That's about another question that we must ask. Something that we may need to interrogate. Okay, why certain things that affect them and exposes them, they run away from it? All right. But there are certain things that people have contributed, citizens have contributed, that have shared online. Look at what happened in 2023. We saw a lot of people, a lot of citizen journalists who were running commentaries about what was happening even within their neighborhoods, how elections were being manipulated, during that period. Did government take it seriously? What has been done? So while citizen journalism is playing its own part, government also needs to play their own part in regard to what citizens are saying, what opinions that they're helping shape. Because it's about public opinion. Remember that what the people think is very critical. Sometimes we overlook these things, but public opinion is very critical. Now, what do people think about even this present government? What are the things that they are pointing out and saying, no, we don't like this? And government is still insisting and implementing those policies that the people have said very clearly that no, we don't like this because it is affecting us, even in the area of housing, in the area of security, in the area of running our businesses and all that. So these are things. So there is no doubt whatsoever. Now, apart from the fact that the online platforms that have been provided, you could still share those opinion pages you talked about, those columns. You still see people who write. I also contribute to hard copy articles to newspapers, and they're published online. And I have people who read sometimes, they send me emails, they reach out to me, you understand, and make comments concerning some of this. Some of them in agreement, some of them in disagreement of the views that I've shared. So you cannot overlook the impact of citizen journalism on the shaping of policies of government?
Yeah, there's actually a particular one, at the risk of calling names. Remember there was a time just quite recently at Onisha. There was an issue about shops, lockups, and things like that. And a very black man came around the place and talked, made very copious.
Good.
Yes.
So referring to the NAFDAC.
The NAFDAC issue. You see, they are responses to that. And there have been other occasions where he had also got to talk about this, what do I call it? This, I had issue with the diaspora people, about the people they take out and all that. So, so I think to a large extent that for very serious.
Let us even take the latest event of I don't know whether you followed the NPFL, where it was alleged online that NPFL collected 500 million naira to Heartland of Owerri, was relegated in the Premier League.
I did follow that story.
Okay. No, relegated. What they did was that they now bought a spot of another club, another football club that was promoted to the main league, the NFL. All right, NPL, rather, NPFL, yes, that's what it's called. They now bought it for 500 million naira. You know, I'm a sports lover. Exactly. I'm a sports, so I follow things of this nature. So, I mean, what happened? NFF rather came out quickly and said no, that this never happened, and began to explain. But some of us who are quite informed about things of that nature, understand. So that is how these things help. Now, they have now revised their policy. They said no club that was not promoted from the lower league to the top league will now be able to buy another spot, or rather take another person. They denied collecting money. They said
they went ahead to make a policy.
They have changed this policy. So this is how things of this nature, citizen journalism, has affected, the tweaking of policies where it became necessary.
Yes, for sure. The citizen journalist is actually taking the media space. There are many of them now.
Yeah.
And even people who are trained in journalism have decided to do that. But let's look at the flip side. You have spoken to them before, but let's take them as just the major segment of this conversation.
Okay.
Major challenges of citizen journalism. You talked about fake news. I don't know. I could add bias.
Where there is no gatekeeper, when people are also not trained in the profession, because we must understand these things. There's a lack of gatekeeping. Gatekeeping means that you have someone who looks at what you have done with a second eye.
Yes.
And then, correct certain things. You polish an article by removing things that ought not to be there, things that you believe that the generality of the public shouldn't even have access to. That is one thing about gatekeeping. So gatekeeping means that you also verify, information that is provided. Yes. Are they factual? So these are the things that we are lacking, some of the things we are lacking. And the number two major point is that the people who are engaged in citizen journalism are not professionals. They are not professionals. So the ethics of the profession, they don't understand it. So there's a lot of violation of ethics. There's a lot of violation of the legalities, the legal regulations that guide journalism practice. So that's another negative aspect of it. And this is what leads to things like fake news. Someone will now sit down and contrive a story, something that never happened, and then present Chief Anioke, put words in his mouth as if he's the one saying things that are negative, while Chief Anioke is very innocent. And then people begin to look at him as someone who is corrupt, as someone who is demented even. So these are the negative aspects of citizen journalism. And that is why I keep saying that we need some kind of regulation. How do we regulate? Then we also need to teach people, sensitize, education. These are things we must do persuasively. It is not something that you can ram down their throats. But we need to begin to, appeal to the sensibilities of our people, their senses, and say, no, this is the proper way to do this thing. Let us not begin to throw content online. You've seen contents that We never talked about these algorithms, how all the social media platforms get data about you and know the kind of content that you constantly get in your notifications. That's how these things work. So there's even a theft of that's not the subject for today. How a lot of our data is stolen. Data theft is something that is actually, it's on the front burner today as far as online journalism practice is concerned. So there's this data that there are things we must begin to consciously do. So those are the negative parts. So how do we begin to sensitize citizen journalists so that they will be very, very circumspect in presenting their report? Even the language with which these things are couched matters. Because people you're speaking to a mix of people. You're not speaking to just your mates. Even if you're speaking to your mates, you must learn to be polite in presenting. Look, there are certain things you might want to tell me now. The way you've told me that thing would make me not accept what you have said. But there's a way of communicating this information that will reason with you and say, oh yeah, so these are some of the flip sides.
Okay, I just want you to speak to the issue of invasion of privacy.
Yeah.
Before now, we just knew that those who are holding public offices were golden fishes and they cannot hide. And so it was often a serious issue when a private person doing his private business is, you go take on him and then begin to report about his. But today, journalists do not care a hoot at all. Whoever they meet, wherever they see, whatever they hear, without verification, they do what? They go. How has it impacted society?
It has impacted society quite negatively. I have already dwelled on it to a certain extent. It is something that is not acceptable. That's why I talked about the ethics of the profession. When you have people who are not trained in journalism, they don't understand that there are values that guide journalism practice. If you're familiar with Tom Rosenshall, I believe he developed the 11 principles of journalism, where the first principle is that journalism is actually anchored on the truth. And journalism should be for the people. You speak on behalf of the people. So citizen journalists should understand that private citizens have their private rights. They have their privacy. There's a privacy law. If you're familiar also with media law, media law and ethics, you understand? I don't know whether you actually stumbled into Theo Benson's work.
I did.
Oh, fantastic. He called it Nigerian press law.
Yeah, I did.
As old as that document, that book
in my master's, it was a compulsory.
Fantastic. So as old as that book is, it is still something that is quite relevant. But I will also encourage those who have taken this, because a lot of people have been empowered financially. It's an aspect that we didn't look at. But citizen journalism has actually empowered a whole lot of people. You referred to a very dark man. You understand? So look at him. He's a very wealthy person today on account of the visits that people make to his platform.
He's a citizen journalist.
Yes, that's what he is. He's an activist. He's a citizen. He's an online activist. That's primarily what he is. So you can see, so there are also advantages in that aspect. But in terms of violating people's privacy, we have seen more violation of people's privacy today than ever before. And people should also understand that there are laws that can govern that. In fact, there's the cyber security law. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I encourage all citizen journalists to go and read the cyber security. It's a new law, and some people have gone to jail on account of it.
There's a lot of nudity.
Definitely.
Pornography.
Of course. Yes.
But of course,
that's why
online journalists would splash anything.
When I talked about sense and sensibilities of people, that's what I referred to. No, I didn't actually. But you see, there are sites too today that still provide, for those who are interested in pornography, still provides them the leeway to go and do that. And watch whatever they want. But when you begin to throw it at citizens,
I'm saying,
when you begin to throw it at citizens, you're violating their sense and sensibilities. And they have a right to say no. And you should even be arrested and prosecuted. And whatever laws, or whatever the sentences, sentencing that actually that area provides, you should go in for it.
Okay, we should be getting to the end of this conversation, but not before I talk about how could society hold citizen journalists to account without actually infringing on freedom of expression.
Yes, freedom of expression, the freedom that we all have. It's not just the freedom for journalists, but it's the freedom that we all individually have. But then how these things are being practiced is something else. Whether we can actually agree. Somebody said that you have a freedom to express yourself, but the freedom after expressing yourself is what you cannot guarantee. You know what I mean? Because
Professor Des put it more differently.
Okay.
Yeah, it says that you have freedom to wave your hands, but you must mind the face and the nose of those standing next to you.
Yeah, it's actually a legal maxim.
Yes,
that a man has a right to swing his hand, but his right ends where another man's nose begins.
Yes,
that is actually a legal maxim. All right. So now, in terms of how we balance it, citizens, those who watch, should constantly call out those who spread fake news. We see people who are doing it today, but we need more people to actually engage in that. When you begin to call them out, when you begin to report their pages, and then you see them, most of these platforms begin to ban them, prevent them from spreading such information online that is categorically false, or that categorically attacks individuals who are innocent, people who should be going about their businesses. You see that these things begin to decline. That is one way. So citizens have a role. Don't just shut your mouth. Don't keep quiet. When you see something, say something. I think that's a balance. Something has been going on. Something we've been being told by security agencies. When you see something, say something. Same should also apply online, on social media platforms. Once you see something that is false and you have evidence to prove that that thing is false, please share it immediately. Do not wait. Don't say later I will do that.
Okay. Before I ask you this other interesting question, I just want to remind our viewers that you can send your comments, your views, using our hashtag Freedom Square TV.